And we are back with another podcast, Podcast 3. Welcome to the Moneyac Podcast, where we talk about all things money, movies, and games. And our next guest here is Manu Tausch. Did I say your last name right?
You did. Manu
Okay.
Tausch.
Okay.
It's German.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Hey, thanks for the invite. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we worked at Rhythm and Hughes Vancouver very briefly together. That was like over 10 years ago or so. But
2013.
Okay, so exactly 10 years.
Yeah.
And you have recently made the leap into the game side of things. In fact, you're the CEO and co-founder of Moonspire Games, which I'll pop up the banner here. And
that's right.
And before we get into that, why don't you give us a little bit of a background on yourself?
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, well, my first podcast, so I'm just gonna wing it. So I'm now the CEO of Moonspire Games. We're producing a game called Speechbound, which is a language learning RPG, which is something that hasn't really been done in the quality and complexity that we're aspiring to do. Apart from that, I'm a polyglot. I speak more or less 7 languages.
Oh, wow.
All the way from, of course, German, my native language, to Spanish, English, French, Portuguese, with a little bit of Chinese and Russian in the mix.
Wow.
I've been a technical director. That's how we met back in the day at Rhythm and Hughes, where I did, effects for those big tentpole movies.
Yep.
I am still a programmer. So on the game side, currently I take care of the language database and all that's involved with the academic side of things when it comes to language complexity. I've always been, before, I've been the co-owner and visual effects supervisor of Stormborn Studios, which is a award-winning visual effects company. We actually just won 2 awards this year, the Leo and the VES award for the show 5 Days at Memorial. And recently I've been also with the same team nominated for a Emmy, which is quite nice to sort of get some recognition 1 year after leaving the movie industry and transitioning to games. Suddenly some awards roll in, and that's a really nice feeling of accomplishment.
That's
amazing. I've also been a visual effects producer and pipeline supervisor at Stormborn Studios. And in general, I guess you could say I'm sort of like, I'm a student for life.
Yeah, I guess you're a multi-talented dude, man. And so are you still working in the visual effects, that company you mentioned?
No, that chapter has been closed.
You moved on.
Last May.
Okay.
Is when I officially resigned. I sold my shares in the company. I used those proceeds to prop up Moonspire Games.
Gotcha.
And since then, I haven't worked on a single shot, which is very nice.
I bet. So what was the inspiration then? I mean, obviously, you have 7 languages that you know. So I assume that was somewhat of the inspiration, but there must be more.
Yeah, that's right.
Getting into the games.
So when I grew up in Germany, the Germans are always known for having a pretty good school system. I went to one of the highest, where basically the highest school is called academic high school in Germany. We call it Gymnasium. Okay. And I made my degree there. I graduated in French and arts. So I was always like the artsy guy. I was always sort of with that brain that's a little bit more on the artistic side of things. I was always pretty much the worst student when it comes to mathematics, physics, and chemistry. And
interesting.
Getting exposed to the program that came out much later.
Okay.
I got exposed to French in school, and most people say, "Oh, it's awesome to grow up bilingual." I did not.
Okay.
My grandmother is French. My mother is half French. I'm a quarter French, but at home we never spoke French. So for me, I always had the urge to get exposed to the French culture more. I've got some family that lives in Guadeloupe, which is a French island in the Caribbean. I've got some family in France as well, and so I always wanted to connect and sort of explore my roots a bit, which drove me towards learning French and getting really deep into it. Over the years, I must have read probably 50, 60 books in French, like complex books. So I try to like increase my vocabulary quite a bit. And of course, when you're growing up in Germany on that school, I was exposed to Latin for 4 years, which was quite the experience. And of course, with 12 years, I started to speak English in school. And so that was always sort of I always was connected to languages that way when I grew up.
Right.
And then I had this one incident where I was working in visual effects. I was at Method Studios. I was a lead on Captain America, The Winter Soldier, and Doctor Strange.
Maybe we had overlap there. I don't remember that.
We absolutely did. We absolutely
right.
did.
Okay.
And back then, I had this unfortunate accident that I popped a disc in my lower spine, and I was sort of like, I couldn't walk properly for like 3 weeks, and I kept watching Netflix, and after like one week of binge watching, I got so fed up. I'm always my brain is always active, and I need to start doing things. So I decided to learn Spanish. So I went online, and I have this sort of, I'm an autodidact, so I can learn most things just by myself. I don't need anybody to tell me what to do or to give me like a curriculum. So I jumped online. I went to a website called italki.com, which was sort of some sort of language exchange. I used Google Translate, dictionaries, and contemporary apps like Duolingo. And I just started hitting Spanish, exercises, vocabulary and grammar. And about 3 months later, I was pretty fluent in Spanish. So
wow, that's fast.
I sort of developed. It was pretty good, yeah. So I
took 2 years, and I couldn't. I couldn't say 2 sentences.
I think the problem with language learning is that you need an approach. You need to have motivation and consistency, but you also need to have some sort of idea on how you approach the matter. And as soon as you know the structure and the way that you're going to go about it, because we're all individuals and we all have different brains and different ways of learning things. But if you know that, then you can make rapid progress. And so I developed a style that works for me, that allowed me to rapidly progress in languages. And so when COVID hit, I jumped into Portuguese full on. And the interesting thing is that time I was actually working full time, and I was just doing it on the side. But my technique worked, and a few months later, I was just speaking Portuguese fluently. And
were you planning to go to Portugal, or just for fun?
I've been to Portugal 3 times. I have a few friends that live there. Lisbon is actually a super nice city. The people in Portugal are super good, super cool. The food is delicious. It's sort of the European California, right?
That's what I heard. I have a friend who just moved there. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually learned surfing.
Gorgeous.
Well, I had like surf teachers that taught me surfing in Portugal. They got super nice waves. They got those big, crazy maverick surf spots there. Nazaré, for example, where we get some of the biggest waves in the world. And because it's sort of like the most western part in Europe, you got some of the best waves there. It's basically the paradise for surfers in Europe.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so I started learning Portuguese. I hit it really off. And because of, applications, there's one app that's called Tandem, which is basically a language exchange. It sort of turns into this Tinder thing where people just go online to like hook up with people, which makes it super creepy. Not me included, okay?
Yeah. Sure.
But the thing is, I actually made a lot of friends in that app and just started talking in Portuguese and just, getting better with it. My Portuguese, sort of Brazilian Portuguese, the Portugal Portuguese and the Brazilian Portuguese are very different. One sounds more like Russian, and the South American Brazilian Portuguese sounds a lot more melodic and musical. And after that, once I realized I like languages, then I sort of started eyeing Chinese. And the idea for the game came really because I do like video games. I've played a lot of different RPGs in my life, from the Final Fantasies to the Diablos and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought, if you would immerse yourself in a language, that's the best setting for you to make the most rapid progress. That actually goes for anything that you do. If I take you and I put you into a plane and tomorrow you're in Russia, then all
You're going to have to
gonna be
learn pretty quick,
exposed to
right?
is Russian letters, Russian sounds, people that speak Russian, and your brain is gonna adapt rapidly. So my idea was, why don't I take my experience that I got from visual effects and apply that to the game side of things? I can make things excellent. Like, I'm a pixel guy, right? In visual effects, we're all about
how everything looks, and it's all visual.
The pixel fucking thing, the French say "niquer la mouche," which basically means
same thing.
To like have sex with the fly.
Okay.
But it's just it's the same thing. So I'm pretty good at making things very, very good looking, and so is my my business partner Phil Amelung, who basically took on the venture with me, amongst of another team of amazing people that we're now. But the initial idea that I had for the game was basically language immersion within a video game. You enter the world, and all you do is connected to learning a language, from writing to being exposed to dialogues to the audio side of things. We have now technologies that haven't really existed in that quality, 3 to 5 years ago, like the text to speech or the speech to text.
Right.
There's countless of companies in the tech space that are competing in this
especially
realm.
With AI and totally.
You got it. We're using Microsoft Azure. So they have a pretty good repertoire of different voices and nationalities that you can choose from, and you can even put in stuff like emotions in the latest rollout of the API, where you can say, cool. I want the API to whisper. I want the API to like be angry or to shout, and that now really solves one problem, which is localization. Before, when you made video games, you had to hire costly voice actors. And if you wanted to translate your game into another language, you then had to find voice actors in that language that could perform the same action. That is very costly. Not only do you have to find these people, but you have to pay them as well. So the text to speech, of course, it's a paid API. So you do have to open your wallet for that, but it definitely solves the problem with finding people, and you can automate it. So I can, if I have a sentence like Manu is going to school, I can say, I want this in North American accent with male voice number 2 in a whisper type of setting. And then you get that. And then because in the game Speechbound, you can choose several language pairs. So you can go from Spanish to English or English to Spanish. So you can basically just in your program, you can decide based on a switch, what language is the text-to-speech API outputting. And that makes it very, very powerful for creating video games nowadays, because suddenly you're no longer tied to voice acting. And so I had the idea of Speechbound. Back then it wasn't called Speechbound, but I had the idea in 2021. And back then, my business partner, Goran Pavlis, who's now the owner of Stormborn Studios, we had this sort of moment where we were a bit frustrated with the visual effects industry, how the payment structure is dealt with, and deadlines, and being a service provider for films. It's not really the best business model, and we know Rhythm and Hues, they won an Oscar and still went under a few months after.
So and within 2 weeks of winning the Oscar.
So which is crazy. That's insane. So you have this problem. We are all super passionate about the movie industry, but at the same time, you're kind of pigeonholed by the big studios, and there is not that much creative freedom at the end of the day. I wanted to do something where I can put my own ideas and thoughts and creativity into it, and I wanted to create an IP. An IP that can generate money for myself without being dependent on chasing jobs in the visual effects industry. So
Right.
I had the idea. I sort of proposed it to Goran at that point. He was like, hey man, I don't know anything about languages, or he does actually speak 3 to 4 languages, but he's not such an avid enthusiast as myself.
Sure.
So I then very quickly started to learn Unity. I just went ahead.
That's where all the mobile
in my,
games are. Yeah.
That's right. In my spare time, I started to learn how to program in C#. I did like little prototypes. I had this one space game where you would fly with a spaceship across the screen, and then you had like a grappling hook, and you had to like grab words or letters in order to form words.
Yeah.
Which was my first sort of exposure to actually programming a game. And of course, my code was shit. It was utter garbage, not performant. It was not optimized. It was all over the place. But I got exposure on how to do it, and I got a feeling on what is needed in order to do a project of that scale. So then over the next year, I basically gave Goran my unofficial notice. I said, hey, listen, I give you 1 year. We're going to slowly phase myself out. Right. We're going to find other people to take over my responsibilities. And of course, I had the duty to finish the projects that we started. Right. I wanted to be still a person that people can rely on instead of leaving somebody hanging. So over the next year, we did Lock and Key season 2 for Netflix, which was a massive visual effects sequence for us, where there was this house standing on top of a cliff, and Stormborn was tasked probably with, I don't know, maybe 20 shots. They were all pretty effects heavy. Stormborn actually got always hired for either the season openers or the season finales of all of those shows that you find on like Warner Brothers, Apple TV, Netflix, Amazon Prime. So we did stuff like Man in the High Castle season 4 finale, where like there's this crazy high-speed Nazi train that derails, and we had to destroy it. Right. And in Lock and Key, we had this cliff where there was a house sitting on top, and we had to destroy the house and make it crumble down the cliff and fall in the water. And Stormborn actually always was, initially we were all destruction guys before opening the studio.
All the effects
I was
guys,
like,
right? Yeah.
Yeah, I was like an explosion guy. I was doing a lot of like smoke plumes, explosions, and some destruction here and there. But then in 2020, we did a project that was called Project Blue Book. And Project Blue Book was a show where there was like a UFO coming out of an ocean, and it was sort of this unidentified object. There were people on the USS Wisconsin, which is a big military ship. And so suddenly they see this thing that comes out of the water and starts speeding towards them. And so Stormborn was tasked with that crazy sequence, which was our first big water show, basically. We had to create this massive wave which almost toppled the ship, and the water comes right into the camera at the end of the shot. I think there was 270 frames of full-on composite simulations that were all sort of nested in each other with spray and foam and smoke simulations. It was massive for us. But that show got a lot of recognition, which then later on got us
So that's with all the awards you mentioned earlier. Yeah.
That got us in bed with ABC and Apple TV. They hired us to do 5 Days at Memorial, which is a show where basically it's telling the story of Hurricane Katrina and how it, floods the lower 6th Ward, which is a very poor neighborhood. It's a very political show. And basically what happened is the hurricane came, the levees that were in that city, the levees are canals that are basically artificial with like huge concrete walls. And what happened, one of those levee walls gave in, and all of the water from the canal went over and started flooding the neighborhood and just taking away the houses and uprooting everything, utter destruction. And that was by far the craziest shot that we ever worked on in our entire life. We had 650 frames without any cuts of pure simulation. It was crazy.
And so you were tasked with all of that sort of effects work to try to ease yourself out of the visual effects company into the game.
That's right.
So tell me about how once you decided to make that leap over to the game side, did you find a partner, or were you just diving all in yourself? Like I know it
Right.
says co-founder, so I
Yeah,
assume that you
that's right.
have a partner there.
Yeah. So in the beginning in 2022, the first thing that I did is I went to my Facebook and I typed in there, "Hey guys, I want to make a game. Who's interested?"
Uh-huh.
One of my ex coworkers, who you might actually know, Tom Holland,
Mm-hmm.
is he's a Canadian living here in Vancouver. He actually told me, "Hey guy, I want to write a script for your game," because I was like, "Hey, I'm interested in somebody who can write scripts." So Tom actually jumped on board very quickly and started learning Unity himself. He's a very versatile, talented guy. He is an animator. He worked in visual effects production. He knows about 3D software, and he's done 2D and 3D animation and won a bunch of awards for some of the short stories that he's been writing.
Mm-hmm.
So he said immediately, "Hey, let's do it."
Mm-hmm.
I then connected with one of my ex coworkers, Jared Barber, who's a animator, and he sort of was initially very fond of the idea and started helping me, drop some ideas and create some primitive assets that I could use to test with prototypes. And then over the next year, I was slowly building my network in the games industry because I was completely new. I didn't know anybody. I
Mm-hmm.
had to I had to get insights on how to do game pipelines, how to write proper codes in C# and Unity. I had to get familiar with ideas that I've never considered up until this point.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my ex co-workers, as well as very good friends, Philip Amelung, when I told him about the idea in the beginning of 22 of last year, he actually said, "Hey, I want to do the game art for your game." And he straight on said, "Hey, let's try to explore this idea of me becoming your art director." He's a super talented 3D sculptor. When I was studying film and animation in Munich in 2006-7, around that time, he was an instructor at one of the schools there, and
Mm-hmm.
he was teaching ZBrush and different sculpting tools and techniques. And he was one of the fastest guys. He would like model you a full dragon with all features in like a few days. He's that good.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
he basically said, "Okay, let's do it. I've never done anything cute." He's usually known for doing super
Like
gory and
monster type
like
of things. Yeah.
crazy monsters, like
Yeah.
stuff that will fill your nightmares, basically.
Right.
And he was saying, "Okay, I'm gonna try to do something cute." So we kind of started this game in 2D. We said, "Okay, let's do a tile map approach," which is a very low overhead because all you need to do is you create some tiles and then you create an animated character and you walk around in that tile map world. You can define a bunch of colliders that you can't run into, and that way we thought we'd have a very simple way of structuring the game.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I left Stormborn last year in May, and we started to actually get into the production of the game, we realized if we wanted to do things like the character can climb up in height, he can traverse different levels in height, that is actually really hard to do on a just 2D based approach.
Mm-hmm.
So then we started to slowly more go into the direction of the 3D designed approach. We still have like a top-down camera that's very reminiscent of old Super Nintendo Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past type of style,
Mm-hmm.
but it's modern. It has a little bit of parallax, and it allows us to really explore the spaces in 3D and go anywhere where the character needs to go. And
Cool.
at that point, in November last year, we decided it's time. We have a bunch of stuff that's already working for us. We now need to start the company, hire people, burn all of our precious money, and get into production. And that's what we've
So
done.
that's the part I want to know about, because obviously we talk about movies, money, and games, and the money
Mooney, yeah.
piece, Mooney. The money piece is the interesting part because I think that's what holds people back from taking action on whether it's an investment or taking action on a cool idea they have for a movie or a game or whatever it may be. Now, you mentioned you obviously were able to sell your portion of the shares of the visual effects company you had to sort of fund. Now, the people that you had initially before you had to start hiring, was everybody sort of co-founders and they were just working pro bono?
They were pro bono. Yeah,
Brilliant.
That's right. Like
And
back
so
then,
who paid for and how did you get people when you had to actually start hiring people? How did that work out?
Right. So we're an indie company. So we're completely self-funded.
Yeah.
And my co-founder and myself, we are basically putting up the proceeds that are needed in order to fund the venture. So we have to say straight away, if you're trying to found a company in North America and you get yourselves a bunch of North Americans on board, you're going to be bankrupt tomorrow because salaries are crazy high.
Yeah.
Especially during the COVID time, salaries have been shooting
insane.
up 30, 40, 50%.
Yeah.
You can't afford it.
Yeah.
Of course, I had some proceeds from my Stormborn exit operation, which I've been putting up. And my co-founder, Philip Amelung, he is sort of in a similar position. So we do have funds. But of course, those funds will only last a certain amount of time. But the good thing is, because I worked in the visual effects industry, outsourcing is now,
of course,
it's totally possible.
Right.
It's what we've been doing. We were actually one of the first companies in Vancouver that's being mostly outsourcing stuff. And that's how Stormborn could actually become profitable and very successful, because we weren't tied like the big studios like the Sonys and the Industrial Light and Magics. We weren't tied to have everybody just in front of their computer at the office on location. We had, on a lot of the shows, we had artists from Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, all over the place. And I got, because I was producing those shows and I was supervising them as well, I was getting very comfortable having different time zones, having people that even speak different languages. And for me, having the skills that I can speak Spanish and Portuguese and all of these other languages, the first thing that I did, I was looking at places that are, in terms of time zone, not too far away from where I'm located, and where people still had very high skills. And one of the first places that I started looking at was Argentina. Argentina is in a hyperinflation state right now. The economy is going down, and it's been like this for a long time. And people over there are incredibly skilled. They're very, very nice to work with because of the Latin warm-heartedness that they bring to the table. For me as a European, it is super easy to connect with Latinos. So I started branching out to Argentina, and we have one guy who's working from Germany. We just hired an intern who's sitting in Norway. We did then go and find a studio partner called Ave Tetsuya, which is located in Indonesia. And they do a lot of amazing artwork for us on the 2D side of things. On top of that, I recently hired a 2D artist in Malaysia, and her name is Tuting, and she's amazing. She does 2D concept art. And so...
And how are you finding all these folks? Are you just blasting it out on LinkedIn?
I'm networking.
That's the best thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, like I go and target languages either on, let's say, ArtStation, LinkedIn, or I've even been looking in Tandem, which is the language app that I'm using. It's the social media network that I mentioned earlier. I've even been starting to connect with people there, and I just put it out there, and then I start talking to these people, get a feeling for their skill set, and a lot of times we speak not even in English, which is very interesting. And
so you're not even having to do the tax credit piece then, because you're kind of all over the world then.
To us, the tax credits are currently completely irrelevant, honestly.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Like it would be maybe it might be interesting at a later point in time, and there are tax incentives that we are taking advantage of, or we will be, such as the SHRED, the Scientific Research and Development Program, which is a very interesting thing, which I also got exposed to while working at Stormborn. We used SHRED in order to claim some
R&D
credits.
Stuff. Right. And that's like 20% in Canada, right?
It's you can say it's 30%, but it's a little bit staggered. It depends on who applies for it. It depends on what the function of that person is and how they're exposed and what their workload that is directly exposed to programming and scientific research. So you
Gotcha.
can't, a lot of times you can't claim the full amount, but you can claim chunks of it.
Right.
It really depends on company to company.
Gotcha. Well, I know we're butting up against 30 minutes here. And so it's been incredibly informative because I think that's a big thing for what I want to sort of bring out to everybody is just the big taking action piece. I think that just holds a lot of people back. And it's amazing to see how you've got all these ideas and you just take action, whether it's from wanting to learn another language or creating a whole new company. And I love the idea of Speechbound. It's a great idea. In fact, I'm going to Paris in September with my son and my parents, and I know he would love to play a video game while learning French because he's currently playing around with some apps right now, and then he's going to be taking it in high school this year as well. But I'm excited to see when this game comes. When is it released? When are you planning to release it?
So our current plan is 2025 Q4 for the release. We have a lot of work ahead of us. We're now 11 to 12 people at the company, and money is burning fast. So we basically have a few milestones that we have to hit in order to be able to, take our vision to the next level and actually release the game. So the first milestones that we just hit were to release our website. We took about 3 months to work on the website. It's really, really complex and amazing. We did everything with custom designs and a lot of different custom codes. Then the next prototype that we're about to hit is the release of our prototype, which will happen basically early next week. We have about a group of 150 to 180 people that we're going to send the prototype out to. They're going to start testing it, giving us feedback. We're fixing bugs, and we're making the whole experience much more interesting and smooth. Once that happens, slowly we're going to start handing out the prototype to maybe a few YouTubers and streamers. And then in Q1, Q2 next year, our goal is to raise a Kickstarter campaign and try to raise a lot of capital in order to bring the game to fruition.
Level. That's great.
So basically, right now we're full on the social media marketing journey, which is a little bit of a two-edged sword. On one hand, you got to produce a game. On the other hand, you got to start gaining following online. We're like on TikTok, Threads, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Discord. Right. And so we need to take care of all of that, output graphics and produce the game. So that's a challenge, but we're definitely counting on, hopefully making some waves with a little bit of luck. Maybe have like,
absolutely. There'll be a lot. I think it's a great idea. And in fact, you and I should keep in touch on this because I just did the rounds at the previous game company I was with at GDC and DICE and meeting all the big publishers and working with CAA, a big agency. So we should talk. But additionally, I'm about to launch the Money Act community, which it's all about the investment strategy that I've sort of created over time. And then people in the community get to throw out ideas of investments that fit within the strategy. But taking it a step further, I'm also working with a producer who I invested in a Hallmark film of his.
Oh, no way.
And they've put together a way for people to not necessarily crowdfund, because that crowdfunding means that you're not actually investing, but it's a way for a whole bunch of investors to basically invest in a movie. And I was talking to him about how taking that same strategy further with movies and games, with taking the Money Act community and being able to invest in some projects on a larger scale. So this may be something that may fit in there, maybe not, but either way, you and I should talk because I do have some connections to the bigger investors as well. And
that's perfect. So yeah. What's your goal to launch this community? When are you gonna throw that online?
Well, I just redid the whole website for the courses that I put together, as well as the whole launch, which is a bunch of automated emails and stuff like that. My son, being 14, knows Discord, so he's put together the communities because I have no idea what I'm doing. And And so it's ready to launch here fairly soon. I'll probably get it going maybe in the next week or two. And it'll be
That's
slow at
amazing.
first, just with, a few people that jump in. And I've already got some people who have taken the courses and have, added $1,000 to their monthly income and doubled their wealth and all that kind of stuff. So I know it works. I've got it working for me. And so that's just that part of the community, but I'm wanting to branch it out and bring like investments to the community, like something maybe like yours or other people who have films or games that they want to make. So it'll be getting going. It'll start slow at first, but I'm hoping it'll build up into something fun.
Well, that's the thing with communities, right? You got to start somewhere. You got to be consistent, and if you have a good product, hopefully it's going to turn into a snowball system and then eventually into an avalanche, right?
That's right. And speaking of that, there's my website that you can go to. You can take the character quiz right now, and you'll be added into our email list if you take that character quiz, and you'll be notified as soon as the community's ready to roll. And I will also be adding some more to that website very shortly. And once that's done, then the community will be ready to launch.
It's always sounds easy, but I know it's a lot of work to get something like that off the ground.
It is. It's a lot of work, but it's fun. It's fun work when you're doing stuff for yourself, like you said, at the beginning, where it's your IP, it's your.
That's right.
You own that piece. You're creating an asset.
You put your heart in there, you put your entire passion in there. That's the way I see it.
Exactly. Any parting words that you want to say? Obviously, we've got your website that people can go to, and is there social media that they can learn more about the progress of your game?
One thing I wanted to mention is Speechbound and Moonspire Games as a company would not exist without our team. Mm-hmm. We have some really amazing people on board. I just want to mention a few names. We have Daniel and Boris, who are our programmers, who are absolutely killing it. They're like code ninjas, writing the entire part of the Unity side. We have Stefan Tegel, as well as Thomas Holland, who are doing a lot of awesome stuff for us. Stefan is doing 3D art in Germany, and Tom, as I mentioned, is here with us in Vancouver. We have Avid Tetsuya, which is our studio that's operating for us in Indonesia. We have Tuting. One of the super cool guys that I haven't mentioned so far is David. He's our 2D artist from the New Orleans area in the States. He has done all of the visuals that you see most of the visuals on the website, as well as on the t-shirt. This is David's design.
Oh, nice.
So I might give you the links later, so you can add those into the description of the video. The other thing that I wanted to mention is we are at Speechbound at all social media channels, and people can find us there. And the Discord link is to be found on our website. And of course, one thing that people can do to support us, it'd be awesome if you like our project, go to our website and hit that newsletter button and subscribe to the newsletter. That way you will get all the infos about the Kickstarter and about any developments in the game. And of course, any like, comment, share, subscribe helps, because we're a very young studio. We're a very young community. And any click helps.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Manu, for coming on to the third podcast for Money Act. I really appreciate you coming on. And it was a great story. I love hearing about where you've been and how far you've come. And I'm really excited to see when this game launches in 2025. It sounds amazing.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for the invite. That was a super nice talk. And I wish you also all the best of luck with the Money podcast.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate it. And for everybody else, again, here is my website that you can go to. And you can also find me on YouTube, where I've got you'll maybe notice that my facial hair keeps changing because I keep compositing myself into famous movie scenes or TV shows, and the next one is Breaking Bad. So I've got to get the goatee going, and
That's
I bought a
awesome.
bald cap and everything ready to go. So I'll be recording that in a couple more
Heisenberg.
days. That's right. Yeah, exactly. So check that out, and please subscribe if you enjoy these podcasts. Like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Helps the community out. And I will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.